Hey, it's Warren Huart here. Hope you're doing marvellously well. I'm sitting with the great Tommy Vicari. How are you, mate?
Nice to see you.
Good to see you. You have what I would call a very, very eclectic, very extensive career. Your resume is pretty insane, from pop to R&B to now film mixing. I mean, could you tell us a little bit about your journey? I know it's a huge question, but I think it's pretty exciting. Television, yeah.
Theme park music.
I didn't know the theme park
music.
Music.
All the electrical light parade, those kind of things for Disney, for Disneyland, Tokyo Disneyland, Hong Kong Disneyland, Orlando. There's several of them around the world now. Well, basically, I started in the mailroom at Capitol Records. I was delivering mail, and I used to work there from 8 to 5, and then I asked one of the producers who was producing there, Nick Vannelli, if I could go and sit in on some of his sessions, and then so from the time I got off till midnight or so, I'd go in and sit in the studio, and at that time, he was producing Linda Ronstadt and the Stone Pony was the name of the band, and things like that, and then from there I went to A&M Records, and I got a job as an apprentice at A&M Records.
Fantastic.
I worked there for 4 years. 2 years before I actually sat in the chair, because I didn't want to sit in the chair and fail. I wanted to make sure when I did get the opportunity to sit in the chair that I was actually able to do what I said I could do. So I did that. I worked there for 4 years. Then I went to work for Armin Steiner at Sound Labs, which was across the street from Capitol Records, because I wanted to learn how to, he's one of the most world-renowned film engineers, and I work with him to this day. So
amazing.
And then from there I went. I was a staff engineer at his studio, and then I would end up working 10 to 6 and then 7 open, and so that lasted about a year, and I finally went independent, and I've been independent for for the entire time. So I started I guess at A&M. It started really at A&M with Billy Preston. I walked in one day, and they said to me, "Look, Tommy, there's no one to do this. Session.
Yep.
Do you want to do it?" And I said, "Well, who is it?" And they said, "Well, it's Billy Preston." I said, "Nobody wants to do this.
Nobody wants to do Billy Preston.
Nobody wants to do Billy Preston.
The guy that plays
He's
the Beatles,
fifth Beatle."
Yeah, exactly.
I said, "Sure, I'll do it." And we did it. We did this record, and the first record we did literally went to #1. And I thought, well, hell, there's nothing to this, well, of course, that was not the case at all.
Yeah.
I was, it was Billy Preston. It was Billy Preston. It was
definitely as good as the people.
But anyway, to keep going, I started working with Paul Williams, and I started working with A&M at the time was really a oasis of music, and at the time the music was pretty happening. Joe Cocker, Brazil '66, Herb Alpert, Barbra Streisand, Joni Mitchell. Every day you went to school. It was my school, but every day you went to work, it was just amazing. At Joni Mitchell studio, C, Billy Preston's studio, B,
Do you remember which
Herb
Joni
Alpert
records you did?
I was an assistant on Joni Records, and I actually sang on one of on Circle Game, because at that time they would come out and say, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Nothing. Well, come on, we need singers." So they come in and so I sang on on that album with her. As best as I could do. Yeah. But anyway, it was kind of a family communal kind of atmosphere. Everything happening. A lot of great music happening every day.
That's amazing.
So from there, then I worked with Gino Vannelli, which is where Danny and I got involved with them. And he came to the United States, and from Canada, from Montreal, where my wife is from. And then, he had his equipment in my living room, because I was single and that kind of thing, because it wouldn't happen now. But anyway, we did 2 albums, Storm at Sunup and Powerful People. They both got nominated for Grammys for engineering. And then from there, This is a long story. You want me to keep
Oh, I
going?
love this story.
Okay, so from there I was working with Santana up in San Francisco because some of the guys in Gino's band got into Santana and one of the evolutions of Santana, and I worked on a record called Moonflower. At that time I was staying at the
Wonderful record.
Miyako Hotel, and George Duke was in the lobby. And he comes up to me and says, we're going to work together. And I said, sure, okay, because I didn't really even know who he was, in my stupidity. And turns out I went to work for George Duke for 5 years. And we made a lot, and I was pretty comfortable in that position. We were doing great records. This was the music I loved. I mean, I left out this one section where after Santana, I was hired by Warner Brothers to go to Minneapolis and tell them if Prince was for real. I did live with Prince for 6 months in Sausalito. I produced
At a record plant in Sausalito.
yeah,
I've worked
the
there.
first album, yeah, in Studio A.
Yeah. I know that studio.
We did the first record, For You, and basically because they didn't want he didn't want a producer.
Right.
And so they said, well, we'll get you this engineer. And because of the Gino Vannelli records, they said, well, we'll get you this guy because we think he's okay. And so we did. For 6 months, I did that. And then I went to work for George Duke. And we did Jeffrey Osborne records and Howard Hewitt records and Denise Williams records and Stanley Clarke records and, the Blackbirds, I mean, it was just R&B, which was really my first love, that's really where my heart is. And so, I worked there for 5 years. And when you work for one person for 5 years, people call you to work and they say, and you say, well, I'm busy,
Right.
So after a while, they stop calling because you have a gig, And then when I left there, I had to reinvent myself because there was a whole new crowd of people and nobody was calling. So that's when I started to get, I saw an interview one time with Tim Roth, and he says, I'm an actor. I act for money, I act for no money, but I act. And so I thought, well, that's a good philosophy. I'm going to work. I'm not going to stay home and wait for my rate, in other words.
Sure.
I'm going to go work on stuff that maybe, there's 3 reasons to go to work: the people, the project, the money. If you have one of those 3 things, and sometimes you get one out of them, 2 or 3.
The people, the project, and the money.
Right. And if there's not one of those things, I don't go to work, because there's either people I want to work with, a project I want to work on, or to make a living. So I started doing things for very little money, and those things would lead to other projects then. Those things would lead to, because people would, the idea is to be out there, and to be visible to people and let them hear what you can do. And then it took a while. It took a while. I built a studio. That didn't go well.
No, why not?
No, it's a long story, but it just didn't go well. I had a partner, and it didn't work out really well.
Right.
And so so that was a setback, and then I started doing, like I said, these different kinds of things, and slowly but surely I got back into having a client base, and it was a varied client base. It was records, it was television, it was theme park music, it was. And then one day I got a call from a friend of mine to sub for him on a film. And it
What was the film?
The film was Meet Joe Black.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the composer was Thomas Newman, and I went and I subbed for him one day, and I've been there for almost 17 years now.
Wow.
So
I love that movie, Brad Pitt.
yeah. He's a great. Tom is a great composer. I'm working with him right now. We're doing the sequel to Finding Nemo, which is called Finding Dory.
I have young children, so I know all about
So
that.
you know, you've
I've been
seen
seeing
that,
the trailers.
You've seen that film,
Yeah.
yeah.
I've seen the original, and I've seen the trailers for the new one.
Yeah, it's a great job. It's really a great job. I'm really a really lucky guy. I get to work with an A-list composer. He's a very talented, very nice guy. We have fun. We work hard, but
And you're recording amazing musicians.
amazing musicians. George Deering, Tom Newman, Steve Tavoloni. I mean, there's Dan Greco. I mean, these guys are, and then of course orchestras, because his kind of composition is basically sweetened with orchestra. It doesn't depend on the orchestra, although it is orchestral.
Where do
It's
you
kind
record
of
orchestra in this town?
Yeah, we recorded. There's only 3 stages left. There's Fox, there's Sony, and then there's Warner Brothers, and then there's a place called The Bridge that's out in Tahunga. But most of the time we do it at Fox. Most of the time we do it at Fox. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of a short the cliff notes of how I got here.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, when I looked at all your resume and stuff, I sort of thought of another one of my favorite guys is Bruce Botnick.
Sure.
Same thing.
Sure.
Rock and roll. He's probably more rock and roll based, but
Yeah.
ended up doing similar work to you. I think for guys of your talent level that are working with amazing musicians, that your job really is to find the right place for the mic. It's not just a case of like throwing something up, compressing and EQing it as much as I probably do in rock and roll. I manipulate the sound probably more. Your job is to create and capture something that's...
Yeah, well, at one point there was more time too. There was more time to do, even on the film scores. There was times where we had time to perfect things and to work at it. Now everything seems to be, more budget conscious,
Sure.
and they want to do everything fast. So yeah, to answer your question, I do. I mean, I have spent time, we did, microphone shootouts and those kind of things. Where now, no, I just kind of pick the mics I know that will work. And yeah, I capture it. You pick the mic, you place the mic, and a lot of it is done out in the room by the conductor, But I neglected to tell you about the live television that I do too, which is the Academy Awards I've been doing for 17 years now.
Amazing.
And that's a whole other thing, because you have no time to do anything. You're pretty much mixing just
Tell us what
live.
that experience is like doing the Academy Awards.
Well, again, you have to prepare. It's the preparation on all of recording, I think, is the biggest part. If as long as you're prepared, you can pretty much handle everything. I mean, and live television, you have to anticipate anything could happen, and it usually does, and you have to let it go, because otherwise you make another mistake. If you make a mistake, it's live television. There's noise that happens. There's mics that don't work. There's things like that. But I had to learn. It was in a studio situation, you can control everything. That's the cool part about it, is I can control everything that's going down. In television, live television, you can't really control anything. So you have to anticipate all these different things. You have to have backup microphones and pre-record some stuff in case the power goes out or stuff like that, because you don't want to. There have been cases where whole mic rigs have gone out, and so they play pre-recorded stuff. But it's exhilarating and perverse at the same time. It's really when they're counting down from 10. I mean, it's pretty exciting, and then of course, there's a point in a mix down where we basically get 2 or 3 chances at it. You get to rehearse the sound check, which really is horrible, and then you get a rehearsal of the songs, and then you get a full run through. You get another run through, and then you do the show, and that's it. And by that time, you should have it kind of all your cues and all your notes done. And then from that point on, you just write it on the script, and okay, this song is R&B. Okay, this is classical. This is a movie score. This is this is pop. This is rock. So you have to kind of manipulate the orchestra, because if you have if you have a rock band playing against an orchestra, all you hear is drums through all those microphones, so you have to turn off some of those microphones. It's a real choreograph. You know, you really have to choreograph the stuff, and it's very exciting. I mean, it's you're kind of putting your ass on the line. You know, you kind of you know, it's not, you can't control it. You know, it's just, you know, you never know what's going to happen. Sometimes sometimes it doesn't happen until the show, because typically players are saving themselves for the show. So
singers in particular.
Singers, sometimes they don't show, especially recently. A lot of these people don't show up for rehearsals. They send somebody, or they don't, you know. So it takes a lot of I think experience and some luck too to get through it.
I was going to say, I've said this a lot over the years. There is no substitute for acquired knowledge.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been doing this in so many different situations that you can anticipate.
Yeah. That's why I said about preparation. The preparation is really the important thing.
How much time do they give you?
Well, we work at it specifically on the Academy Awards. We have a few weeks to prepare before we get to the venues, to Capitol Records. But Capitol, we've been using Capitol Records to do pre-records now for at least 16 years, and so we kind of know what to do, how to do it there. The crew is very knowledgeable about what we're doing and how to do it and how to anticipate. Hi, Sting's here and he's got a band. You know, that stuff happens. You know, and so you have to kind of just be ready for that. You know, and but usually it goes pretty smoothly. We do pre-records, and then I take the whole orchestra and I go put them in a pit at the Dolby Theater, and I get in a truck a block away, and Danny has I put him in charge. The very first year, I put someone in the pit to represent the audio, because they're not worried about audio. They're worried about lights. They're worried about props. They're worried about, you know, they're worried about everybody but you. So while I'm at the Capitol doing pre-records, I have Danny there, you know, setting the pit up, making sure everybody's got monitors, got headphones, got, you know, they can see the conductor, you know, and you know, they do things like they put cameras in the pit, you know, with 10-foot booms and all of that kind of stuff. So these are the kind of things you have to deal with. You just, you know, when they ask you to do something, I say yes.
And then figure it out afterwards.
And then figure it out. I mean, that's how I got the gig. I mean, Quincy Jones called me and said, "What are you doing tomorrow?" I said, "Nothing." I said, well, I want you to come to this meeting. I said, "What is it?" He says, "Just come." So I went, and it's the Academy Award breakfast, and I stand in there, and someone says to me, "What are you doing here?" I said, "You know what? I don't know. I'm just I don't know. Quincy called me, told me to come, you know." And so someone over here says, "Oh, you're not. You're doing the whole thing." I said, "No, I'm not." She said, "No, yes, you are." so I said, so now I'm a little freaked, and I came back here, and I said, you know, I've never done a live television show. I'm a studio rat, you know. I mean, it's like I called ABC. I said, "Send me the tape of last year's show." So they sent me the tape. And I put the tape in. They delivered it to my house because it's Quincy Jones, you know. So
it's Quincy Jones.
So I put the tape in, and everything kind of sounds like this. And I said, "Well, hell, I can do that." so we prepared, and we had to figure out how much space each person takes. You know, there's 3 feet. You know, there's cello players need more. Drummers have, you know, how big is your setup? You know, you have to figure all this out mathematically.
Yeah.
And I mean, because sometimes we get to the show, and they don't have enough room for the bass. The bass is not, you can't fit the bass in the pit because they have stairs for people to go over. So there's these kind of things, you know. I mean, I could go into it for a long time, but it's a challenge. You just have to be ready for it, and you have to, you know,
so you're overseeing everything.
Yeah, pretty much. That have to do with the audio. Yeah. The audio of it. Yeah.
What are you mixing on now? What kind of console?
In which part?
On the live side, because I've been noticing I went to the Grammys this year and did the backstage tour and saw everything. I've seen a lot of people moving. I mean, everything seems to be digital now. Almost.
Yeah, I'm working on a digital console. It's a German digital console. I forget. Yeah, I'm working with the MTV truck for the Viacom truck from Nashville. I did this year.
Yep.
Which I do this show in D.C. in Washington D.C. with the National Symphony, and they do a 100-piece choir, National Symphony, and Kool and the Gang. I mean, it's like this this
eclectic,
this mix between popular music, a lot of kids from Idol, and the National Symphony does the overtures and all of the patriotic songs and choir, 100-piece choir. So yeah, I first worked with them in D.C. and then I had them come out for the Oscars this year because 3 years in a row we did it live from Capitol Records, and then before that I was working with Dave Hewitt. And Dave had a truck, remote recording services that was out of Pennsylvania. But every year you kind of have to fight for the tools, because they're budget conscious and they want you to mix it on a smaller Yamaha in a Jelco. I mean,
right.
And I say, look, I'm you can go ahead and do that. I'm just not that guy. I'm not that guy. I'm old school, if you want to call it that. But I like to have a console, whether it's digital or analog. I mean, I'm not. I'm not a Pro Tools operator, although now I am running Pro Tools. Most of the movies that I do and most of the work I do navigate the mix page and all of that stuff. But I do have, for years, I had really great Pro Tools operators, so I always thought, well, I fell through the cracks. I didn't have to, to me it was a tape machine with dynamics,
Sure.
And you could, and I didn't have to mute anything anymore. It was great, but the truth is you really can't be an engineer now without knowing this technology. So,
I agree.
So about 5 years ago, I started, getting more involved with it. I have a monitor, and I can set levels, and I can put on plugins, and I can do all that sort of stuff now. But I still need someone to, turn it on. That sort of thing,
And tech it.
Yeah, and tech it, because it's pretty deep. It's pretty deep. It's like, and I always considered it two different jobs. I always considered it in a way two different jobs. Although a lot of people do both, and they can do it very well. And I admire that. I admire that. I'm getting better at that, but I have a different, layer of experience that I deal with, microphones and making people comfortable in the studio, making a comfortable environment so that people can create, You have to be kind of ready when the magic happens. I mean, that's really what the job is. You don't have to, I try not to get in the way of the process.
Right, I agree.
I
think there's a necessity now for people coming up to understand the DAWs, understand Pro Tools, etc.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But the stuff that you're talking about on a global level, to me, is the most important. If you can get a performance out of an artist, it doesn't matter whether you're tracking it to a...
Yeah, I mean...
It doesn't matter what you're tracking.
Yeah, I think they have to be comfortable. And you're going to be in a room with people that for a long time, and it has to be a pleasant experience. I don't believe it has to hurt. There are people that feel it has to hurt, it has to be painful.
Sure.
I don't believe that.
No, nor do I.
I think the music happens in a more comfortable environment, and although I've done my share of uncomfortable experiences, but I don't enjoy those. I do enjoy going to work and working with people. The relationships are very important to me.
Absolutely.
A lot of the artists that I work with, I've done several projects with, and whether it be records or TV or movies. I do mostly movies now.
I just saw Bridge of Spies recently.
Yeah, amazing.
Which you did.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Beautiful movie.
Yeah,
beautiful
great
music.
Steven Spielberg. I mean, I think he's going to be okay.
I think he might do okay.
I think he might do okay. I thought, really good movie. I thought.
It was beautiful.
I also did The Big Short.
Yeah, another great movie.
Yeah, so,
So you had a good year at the Oscars.
I feel really fortunate because, coming from records, a lot of the younger composers, I think, wanted to do more hybrid scores, and a lot of the scores that I'm doing are hybrids. They're pre-records and an orchestra. In some cases, the pre-records are as important or more important than the orchestra. The orchestra is sweetening for these things. So I think there was a transitional period where some composers wanted to move film scores into a more popular medium.
It's my humble opinion, and it's only my opinion. The thing about proper scored, orchestral music in movies is it feels timeless. It doesn't feel like you listen to it and go, oh, that was 73, that was 860, whatever. And I've noticed when things get too current-based that you just watch it 10 years later and it feels dated.
Well, especially in the 80s when we were all using drum machines. You can specifically tell that was a period of time.
Something timeless about orchestral music.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. But in the right, I mean, in certain instances, you can make something that's a hybrid and make it timeless as well. I mean,
absolutely.
The composer I'm working with now is really a master at that. With Thomas Newman, and he prefers to. He has the ability to do orchestral scores. He's done. We did a movie called The Good German, which basically was temped with Max Steiner. So that was film music at its at its best. And then of course he on Bridge of Spies he replaced John Williams. So there is a way to finesse this. I mean, each one of these cues is basically a mosaic. It's different kinds of instruments augmenting the orchestra. So but in the 80s we all were doing. I mean, there was a period of time, and even in records where we were all, concerned about the drum sounds. How loud can I make the drums? And I listen to some of the stuff I do now. I say, well, where's the bass? Christ, it's like, the bass is really running the record, drives the record. But we were all concerned with drum sounds. I think I've gotten to be a better mixer since I've been mixing motion pictures because I'm more aware of the orchestra and what, who's got the melody, who doesn't.
Sure.
Instead of worrying about, do I have my snare drum up loud enough, the French horns are actually playing the melody right here.
Yeah.
Those are kind of things that you learn along the way. That's when I'm going back to thinking you've got it covered when your first record goes number one. You really don't.
Sure.
It was only 4 pieces, by the way, and you had a pretty dynamic performer. So
yep.
It
was a nice start, though.
It was a nice start. I think I had a lot of good times. A&M was a great place. The great stuff went through there. I mean, Mad Dogs and Englishmen with Joe Cocker, Cat Stevens.
Which Cat Stevens?
Well, I worked on some of the Catchbull at 4. I worked on, but I even started to work on Peace Train. But he started at A&M and then he went back to England and he did it back there with Paul Samuel Smith, and they had a great sound coming from A&M was bringing in all this music from, I think it was Chrysalis, and they were Joe Cocker and Cat Stevens and Humble Pie and all that stuff was coming in from England. So it was the largest independent record company in the world at that time, and great music coming out of there. I mean, across the board, all the way from Herb Alpert down. And Herb was a great artist to work for because he gave us creative control on the Gino Vannelli stuff. He gave us creative control. He let us just go do it.
Trusted you.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know if he trusted us, but he let us go do it. He let us do it, and then when it came out, he liked it. I mean, when I mixed that record. A&M had a studio that was, at that time was an 8-bus board in a 25-track world, and the records and the mix rooms were not really up to par. So Armin Steiner had this mix down room that was just really amazing. So I literally took the tape off the machine and I told Gino, I said, come with me. And I went and I put the tape, I went over to Sound Labs and I put the tape on the machine and I played it back to the speakers and he went, wow. What are we going to do? And I said, well, you're going to go ask Herb if we can mix it here. He says, no, you're going to go ask her. So I did, and he said yes. He let me mix it, in another studio. And so I pretty much am here because Herb trusted me. He gave me the opportunity to work. It was a really great place to work. And it still is now. Henson Studio. I'm sure you've been there.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
sure you've been there. Yeah.
Yeah, we did some string dates there on the Phrase first record.
Yeah. So
Beautiful room.
So I try to not rule anything out. I try to keep open mind about any kind of recording or producing or any of that sort of thing.
You know what's interesting you're touching on? I was thinking to myself when you were talking about working with artists and making them feel comfortable. People ask me a lot, which book should I read, which this, which that. And I think that the technical stuff, I think, is easy to find.
Yeah.
The bit that's hard to find is how to get performances out of people. So I always say to them, read the Phil Ramone book.
Yeah.
That's been my favorite book of Jeff's and all Jeff Emmerich's and all these other books. They're all great, but Phil Ramone's is all about the psychology of working with an artist. Yeah,
I worked with Phil. We did Star Is Born with Barbra Streisand, and then I did Maniac, Flashdance with him, and a few other things. But I worked with Phil a lot, all the way back when I was an assistant with Phil. So yeah, I kind of knew how he kind of worked, and Quincy is the same way. Right. Quincy puts the right people together, and he creates an environment where people can create great music, So I was always around that kind of a situation, So I just, having been around the opposite, you go, it really doesn't have. It's hard enough. Mm-hmm. You really don't need, to have all this tension, and I mean, there is tension, but as long as it moves towards a creative end,
Sure.
It's important. What you're doing is important, and it's going to be around when long after I'm not, it's going to be around, and that's important to me, and I don't want it to be. I want it to be the best it can be. So, but yes, Phil was a master at that. Al Schmidt is a master of that too.
Yeah,
Al gets a lot of. Credit, and deservedly so, because he's I've known him for 45 years or something like that. Our kids grew up together and stuff like that. So I watch those guys, and I think that's how you learn too. Mm-hmm. You take a little bit from this engineer and this engineer, and you look at because there's things that Al will do that I won't do, or he has a different concept than I do, But basically, I appreciate what he does, and I love what he does, and other engineers as well. But I took a little bit from each one of those, having worked with them, and it kind of came out me. And I think I do have definite things that I do that other people don't do. Not and they say, well, nobody's doing that. Well, okay, well, I like it, So,
could you give us an example?
Noise. I hate noise. Mm-hmm. Where other people like noise, or analog hiss, or any kind of ticks and pops and stuff. That's hard for me. In a modern world where you have someone that wants to take a sample that's noisy or something. On the Big Short, part of some of the samples that they gave me had ticks and pops, and they were using them as an effect. And I will do whatever I can to clean them up. I will. That's why I had trouble with hip hop, because I couldn't. I would go ahead and try to clean it all up, and then it was defeating the purpose. It was not meant to be cleaned up. That's what was making it unique. So. Sure. I keep asking this question: how do you make a living in the record business? I mean, if Full Sail is graduating 1,000 kids a month, where are they going to go? They come to me with master's degrees and they say, "What's your advice?" And I say, "You know what? find a group of guys that you can get along with and go make some music. Go make some music,
Yep.
you know. Because I don't, you know, I mean, I've done records in this room with artists and go out to record companies. They don't want to pay any money. They don't want to back anything. They don't want to develop anything, you know. So it's just curious to me because I grew up in the record business. I loved it, you know. I obviously didn't know how it ran because I wasn't very successful on that end of it, you know. But because I was always making the stuff, you know. I was always making it and giving it to those guys, you know. And
Sure.
and I thought, look what we've done, you know. And they'd go, oh, you know, that's not what's happening, you know. It's like some great stories about, you know. I was working with George Duke. We did a record with Taste of Honey called Sukiyaki, and it was a #1 record in Japanese in the United States in 1961 on Capitol Records. Taste of Honey is signed to Capitol Records. She does a version of it. It's arranged by Claire Fisher. It's produced by George Duke. I mean, it's just gorgeous. We give it to Capitol, and they say, well, we don't even want this on the record. We don't want this on the record. So she says, okay, we'll leave it on the record, but put out another single. So they put out 1, 2, 3 singles, nothing. So finally she says, well, give it a shot. 1 million singles. It sells 1 million singles. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess there's a ton of these stories. Elton John couldn't get signed. Beatles didn't get signed.
Bowie had full record deals.
Bowie had, yeah. I mean, you know, these are real record business stories. You know, I mean,
U2.
yeah.
Their Grammy, their Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction said that if it wasn't for Chris, they would have been dropped by any other label because they didn't sell enough to recoup on their first 3 albums. I think.
Right.
Having somebody that just believed in you that
Right.
much.
And persistence, you know, and just keep, you know.
A world without U2, one of the last most successful rock bands ever.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody's ever going to be that big again. Yeah, that's.
I love new music. I love new music.
Yeah.
I love it. You know, I mean, I'm a fan of new music, but there's times where, you know, I guess my age, you know, I say, well, you know, I hear stuff, I hear music, and I say, well, you know, that's really, you know, I can hear the melodyne. I can hear the melodyne. You know, I can hear, and people rely on the tools now. You know, they rely on the tools for their musical ability. Oh, you can fix that, right? Yeah, I can fix it. But you can, you know, you can sing it too. You know, you can play it. You know, I mean, the tools are wonderful things. I mean,
I agree.
it's something that it really has taken us to a new level in audio, you know, but to rely on it to the point where it is the artist, then I find I have a little problem with that, and maybe it's just because of my age. I don't know.
No, I think you make a great point, and I think most of us would agree because the problem is actually for the artist, because then it becomes, if for anybody, any time, if you had, it's almost like poor old Chubby Checker. The guy was a genius, but how many times could they do that same, you know, twist version of a song?
Right.
You know, it's a sort of almost the same analogy. If your vocal sound is built around a certain effect,
Right.
and you can't break out of it, you've got a career based on your 3 or 4 singles,
Right.
as opposed to
Right.
Yeah. So I totally relate, and I think
I basically think, you know, I've always felt it's that, you know, there's 3 things that make a hit record. There's the song, and the song. You know, I mean,
great.
I think that's really Quincy's quote. So, but anyway, you know, there's, you know, there's obviously validity to a great singer.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, the songwriting has taken a hit, I think, you know, in a way.
Sure.
Having said that, I'm sure there's great songs out there that I'm not aware of, and I'm open to hearing, you know. But I just think it's,
personally, I know what you're saying. I just miss some of the diversity in the charts. I mean, if you pick, and I've used this a lot, pick a year like 1980, which is one of the most ignored years, because it's not punk rock, so it's not 70s, it's not late 70s, it's not disco, it's not quite new wave yet. It's still this weird point. Nobody talks about 1980 as being a great year.
Right.
But in England in 1980, we had Queen the Game, which had 4 top 10 singles.
Amazing.
And the 4 top 10 singles were Another One Bites the Dust,
Yeah.
disco, Crazy Little Thing Called Love, might as well have been an Elvis track.
Yeah.
Save Me, piano vocal, huge ballad, and Play the Game, which was this weird twisted backwards effect. First time they ever used a synthesizer. So, what's the genre? The genre is the song was great, the song was great, and the song was great.
Yeah.
And that's what I miss.
Yeah, because now you have experts saying this is, you have national playlists. The fact that Billy Preston had a hit record his first time out was, it actually was the B-side to the single, and a disc jockey in Chicago happened to turn it over. So
Right.
there was not a national playlist where they said, okay, this is the list that's going to get played all over the country, and whoever determines that,
Howard Willing said to me he thought the death of the music industry wasn't anything to do with MP3s or streaming and stuff, but was when Clear Channel bought everybody.
Yeah, I
Howard's
tend to agree with that. I tend to agree with
Because
that.
of what you was talking about, suddenly there's national
You could have a
bands.
regional hit. You could have a regional hit, and then it could break out. It could break out. And diversity, I think, was the key to that music, to that era. You could have all those things that you mentioned, and you could have, the staple singers, and you could have, Sinatra. You could have several different kinds of music going. The diversity was amazing, and I think it's good for the business to have that kind of diversity, So, I don't know how we get back to that, but maybe
Yes, I agree.
there is XM radio where you can choose your own. Maybe you can choose whatever. They give you several different formats you can choose from, but I don't know who's making that.
I think you hit on it perfectly. The thing that you said that rings really true for me is when anyone, doesn't matter, starts thinking they know best. Because in this country, the only people that know best are the great American public.
Yeah.
And I feel like the late 90s was tough. I was there making music and in bands and producing and writing the songs. And I remember there was this shift where suddenly bands were getting signed before there was any groundswell. And they were deciding this was going to be the new music.
Right.
And that's just not the way it worked. The
Right.
Beatles were signed to Parlophone, a comedy label. Their
Right.
A&R guy was also their producer,
Right.
George Martin, obviously,
Right.
and a guy we all aspire to be. And Nirvana was signed to Sub Pop in Seattle,
Right.
to a little tiny label. And
Right.
so all these great musical movements had nothing to do with a genius coming along, a self-proclaimed genius going, this is the new genre.
Yeah.
This is what you guys are going to buy.
Yeah, I kind of apply that too to engineering as well. I always say, I never go into the studio knowing this is going to work. I always kind of I always think that, I always said if I ever got to the point where I said, I got this, that's the time when I thought I would stop learning. I would stop doing a good job, because I always go in, really just trying to improve from the last whatever the last thing I did. And I'm kind of a student of it too. I kind of love listening to other mixers and stuff like that, and
wonderful.
people like that to try and even criticizing my own work. I go and I go, oh, I was pretty good that day, and then I wasn't so good that day. That day I didn't do. I mean, nobody can really be. There's things that we do that the magic happens. Sometimes it's just one thing that you do, and all of a sudden the mix just pops in. Sometimes a mix will happen on a live TV show where I just take my hands off the board because it's just happening. It's just there. Whatever I've done to get it to that point, and then all of a sudden you can only make it go, make it worse if you touch it, right? Just let it happen, So I always thought, I never feel like I got this. This is not a big deal. I mean, I know from my experience, we'll talk, and the other thing is, I think interaction with people in the room with you, your assistants and stuff like that. All the guys around you, I try to make part of the experience. We're all in this together. And they always come up and they kind of have your back. They go, hey Tom, you're sending that to the wrong stem. Or you want me to, this is really important. This is really a great part of the gig. That's why I kind of resisted being in a room with a screen by myself. I I kind of resisted that because I kind of like being in it. What do you think? Do I have enough bass? Do you think because after a while you get kind of snowblind, in a way.
Sure.
You're concentrating on one avenue, but okay, I got a great drum sound, but do I have the song? Because a lot of the great music that we all love, if you analyze them, sonically, they're not, it's the performance, the song, I mean, there's something, you either get it or you don't, you know what I mean? I mean, that's why rough mixes, sometimes people get used to. They go, oh, you tried too hard on the mix, so the rough mix sounds better,
Yeah, I've had that happen to me thousands of
times. It's happened to me where you go, Jesus, I should have, I should have relaxed a little bit.
Jim Scott told me about the board mix, and I go, what? The board mix? He goes, yeah, the board mix. It's that whatever you recorded last is the loudest.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I that's true, especially now. I mean, because we're trying. Okay, hurry up. We only have so much time, and so I go back and I listen and I go, what the hell was that? So I have to rebalance everything. Even going to the scoring date, I have to rebalance and make it so that it doesn't shock the director. Like something jumps out. The first time I did a movie date, they said, "Oh, let's play back." It was for Mel Gibson. It was a Mel Gibson movie, and they said, "Let's play the cue back," and so I played it, kind of like at pop levels, and I kind of pinned Mel Gibson up against the back wall, and the composer kind of jumped for the fader and pulled it down, and I thought, oh, this is the difference between the film business and the record business. When I'm trying to make everything as loud as possible, they want to make everything as soft as possible so that the dialogue can get through, So it was a transitional, experience. It was something I had to learn, and I'm still learning. Because I'm a music guy. I want the music to be heard. And in some cases, I think music is used as wallpaper. It doesn't. I mean, I'm a fan of music that helps the story. It helps. I want to. I think it's important to me. But then again, I'm the music mixer, so it would be important to me. I'm giving it off to guys that have spent months putting in, sound effects and putting in dialogue and putting in, crashes and explosions and stuff like that. And I'm getting in the way. Mm-hmm. I'm getting in the way of all this work they've done. What is this music? What? I have to put this now. Can I put my sound effects back in? Yeah, well, it's your movie. You can put whatever you want. It's not like taking it to a mastering session where you finish it all the way through. I mix it, and I give it to someone else. And then what happens from there, I have no idea what happens. So they're two different worlds, and some producers say, if their movie is testing well, they don't want anything to change, so keep the music down, they're superstitious, and I understand that, however, I tend to, if you listen to some of the great motion pictures of all time, Lawrence of Arabia and some of the, the music is an integral part of this, yeah. Mm-hmm. So I just think it's obviously subjective, it's a matter of taste, but I'm a music guy, so I lean that way. I want to hear the music. I'll do everything I can to try and make the music cut. That's one of the things that, like I was saying about noise. I'll cut down noise. I'll do anything where other people are not. Especially a lot of synthesizers I get now. They're running through all these different devices, and there's just a layer of noise across the top of it. And if you have a bunch of these, 100 of them. There's like an ocean sound, So I try to eliminate all that as much as I can.
Do you get a lot of stuff flown into you that has digital clipping in it?
Yes, because things are going down fast and they're being conformed and they're being taken from, MIDI to Pro Tools, and then there's things that happen, there's. So you have to find those out wherever they are. Oh, there's a click there. Where is it? So you start soloing up and find it where, and, there's stuff that, some people would ignore. some people would ignore that stuff. Some people would ignore room noise. Oh, it's human. It's human. No, no, no. You know, or it's the kick drum is coming in after the bass, or they're not together. Oh, that's human. Well, no. To me, it's wrong. To me,
Right.
it's wrong. I mean, you know, there are people who would argue differently. There are people who would argue.
Sure.
But I'm just saying that for me, I tend to want to make things. You know, if I can fix it, I will fix it. You know, and if it's really not that important, I will let it go. If we've exhausted all ways of fixing it, then I will let it go. You know, I mean, there are great records that have their horns out of tune, and we don't notice. You know,
Sure.
until you actually listen. You know,
I was sitting to that point, I was sitting in a studio with Michael Brower a few years ago, and the band I was working with had wanted him to mix the material because he had done the big Coldplay records.
Sure.
And we had a bit of a tuning issue on something, and he said, "Listen to this," and he played Yellow, which was the big Coldplay hit. There's that guitar that goes. He's like, "Listen to the guitar. I told you to listen for it," and then you're like, "Oh, it's so out of tune. Why have I never noticed that before?" He's like, "Because nobody ever pointed it out."
Nobody pointed it out.
So
yeah,
I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
it's all about balance and knowing when to fix and when not.
Yeah. So, and that's what I mean. There are, you know, there's a lot of mixers in the film business that will accept those things. I mean, it's a lot. You know, they mix 5/1s, and there's some that do it very well, but when you're merging, or you're doing a hybrid kind of score, the whole thing is try to blend these pre-records to the orchestra, so that it becomes a different beast. You can't just take Armin Steiner used to say, you don't trust me. You know, no, it's not that I don't trust you. It's just that I have to take all this music that I've pre-recorded and I have to blend it with the orchestra that you're giving me, and if there's any kind of a discrepancy, you know, then it shows up, you know. So anyway, yeah, I mean, it's they're definitely two different worlds, you know, the record business and the film business, and live television is another one. Yeah. So I guess getting back to what we were talking about is, yeah, it's been a varied career for me, you know.
Incredible career.
I like, you know, I like the record business. I grew up in the record business, but I'm not sure that I you know, there's a place for me in it any longer. Although I still long to, you know, go in the studio. I did records in Italy. I did for 14 years. I went after records kind of, you know, went to rap here. I went to Italy and I started working with Umberto Tazzi, Eros Ramazzotti, Laura Pazzini, Pino Daniele. I mean, I started working a lot in Italy, and that was really a lot of fun.
What period was that?
It was in it started in the I guess the early or the late 90s. And we went there with a friend of mine who was Greg Matheson, this producer. It was producing Umberto Tazzi, and so we went there and we did that. And then while I was there, I was introduced to this other artist named Pino Daniele, who was a very big star in Italy, and I did 7 or 8 of his albums.
Wow!
And I did, you know, I would go every year. I would go every year to Italy, and you know, for 2 or 3 weeks. And we would mix one song a day. You know, and it's been interesting. You know, I like that. I like the fact that I can do different kinds of things. I like being able to, you know, even this year I went to Abbey Road and I did 5 different theme park shows. You know, in the big in Studio A. You know, which was
amazing experience.
Amazing. It's amazing. I've been there before. But you know, a lot of work is going to England now because of.
Oh, it is?
Well, yeah, a lot of the film work is going there because in the United States, the orchestra gets paid after if the movie does well, the orchestra gets a percentage of how well they do. Where in England, you buy the orchestra out. In other words, you pay them once, you can use it as a record, you can use it, you know, you don't have to pay them anything. So certain producers will immediately go to England and just buy the orchestra out, and you never have to pay for them again.
Look, thank you ever so much for your time.
My pleasure. Nice pleasure.
Absolutely fantastic. You know, your work is fantastic. I think people are going to love to know the process and your journey. The part about your journey, I let you talk, so I didn't want to interrupt you, but the part about your journey that I loved is the first part of the story. You said you worked 8 till 5, and then after that, you went and sat in and worked and assisted in any way you could up until the early hours of the morning. Because one of the questions I always get, and I don't know about you, the Billy Preston thing was a big deal. It was probably what you could say was a break.
Yeah.
But you had to do all of that really, really hard work to get into a position to have a break. I want to try and shatter the illusion that, you know, you're walking down the street one day and somebody taps you on the shoulder and says, "Hey, I'm going to make you rich and famous." Because my journey is the same thing. You know, I make a great living. I feed a family. You know, my wife doesn't work. I'm blessed. I have a studio. I work really hard. I do what we have to do. But there's no one moment I can point to that said, "Oh, it's just because I was friends with John that this happened." To me, it's an accumulated thing. So I love that part of your journey. I love that you brought that up, because you wouldn't have even got into a studio to be in a room with Billy Preston if you hadn't done, as you said, you didn't even want to sit in the chair until you had done years of observing and working around talented people.
Right, because I thought, you know, to sit in the chair and to fail, it would be one thing, but so I waited until I knew that I could do it, because I didn't, I wasn't sure when you'd get that chance again, right. And yeah, it was something, how it really, transformed from growing up in Granada Hills, California, to end up doing the Academy Awards at the same place that I used to be in the mailroom. I mean, I don't know how that happened, really. Other than the fact that
that's our blog quote.
I worked really hard at it to make sure that I learned as much as I could. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no easy route to it. There's no way. I mean, there's no way. I don't think, in a way, I kind of feel bad for kids that pay a lot of money to get a degree and then end up in a studio getting coffee and running errands, I mean, I just think you kind of put yourself in a position where people can depend on you. You're there. You have to put the time in. I mean, I can tell if a kid comes in and whether or not he's going to make it or not, how if he's in the session or if he's on the internet. Mm-hmm. Or if how involved he is in the session, so anyway, that's kind of what I think it's something I made happen. I don't know exactly how I got here, but I'm here now.
You made it happen by, anybody who can watch this, by literally sticking at it and working and learning, and to be honest with you, you haven't said it, by humbling yourself.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm not the first guy to do this, and I didn't invent it. So I just kind of took from all the greats, and it came out of me.
That's fantastic. I like that. Standing on the shoulders of giants.
That's right. Thank you so much.
Please, as ever, subscribe. Go to producelikeapro.com. Sign up for the email list. You can try a 14-day trial of the Academy. I really appreciate it. It's been wonderful.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Have a marvelous time mixing and recording.